So thank you everybody for coming to the May edition of the Maine Aquaculture Innovation Center webinar series. We're very excited today to have a group with us, a panel that will be talking about sea urchin aquaculture in New England. So this is a very exciting topic, something that we don't always hear about. So I'm glad to see that so many people are interested in this topic. Before we get into that, I do just want to mention that the next webinar, which will be on June 21st, will feature Cole Canwit from the DMR talking about Vibrio. So that will be definitely a very good webinar to attend as we get into the summer season with shellfish farming. But sea urchins today. So today we are joined by Dana Morse from Maine Sea Grant, Coleen Suckling from the University of Rhode Island, and Luce Kogson from Maine CCAR. So they have a great presentation for you, and I will let them take it away.
All right. Thanks, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Dana Morse. I work for the Maine Sea Grant program in the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. I'm based out of the Darling Marine Center, and it has been my pleasure, just a total interesting, fun trip to work with the colleagues here on the panel here, Dr. Coleen Suckling and Luz Kogson. We're missing Dr. Steve Eddy, who directs the Center for Cooperative Aquaculture Research. But we're a team that's been working for the past, probably 4 or 5 years on an issue that has been right at the forefront of urchin culture, which is production of seedlings. And for any real aquaculture production, you got to find out how to get some babies for your crop. And traditionally, production of green sea urchin juveniles has been a very thorny, a very spiky problem. And the team assembled, you're going to hear from them, has gone a long distance to solve that problem. And the next couple of slides, I think, are just the team that you'll see. So there's me back when I had some hair. Next, please. And you'll be hearing from Luz Kogson. And Luz does a ton of the work where the rubber really meets the road. All about urchins. And as she's doing right now, I can see her smiling. Luz smiles when she thinks and talks about urchins. So you'll definitely hear from her. And then I think our next slide, please, is Dr. Coleen Suckling, who kind of brought us all together in her work as a researcher and an educator out of the University of Rhode Island. I'm going to stop there and stay tuned because here we go. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks,
Coleen,
Dana. Oh, sorry.
If you can just go back the previous one.
Okay.
Yep. Hi, I'm Luz. I think some of you or know me about the work also that done at CCAR, University of Maine. I have been here for a little while and thinking and breathing about sea urchins for the last 5 years. And it's pretty exciting and just to get to this point because we don't have all the answers, but we have been able to solve some. And then that is so exciting. And I'm just more than happy to share that with you. And thank you very much for joining us.
Great, thanks, Luz. So I'm Coleen Suckling, and it's been a real privilege to work with such a great team. But I also want to just say thank you to all of you joining us today. We're possibly some of the biggest sea urchin nerds out there, so we're really happy to have some fellow audience members here to kind of nerd out on urchins with us today. And I hope that you can kind of maybe find something new, or maybe a new interest or refreshed interest in urchins moving forward. But as you can probably tell from my slightly unusual accent, I am not from the US. I moved over from the UK in 2018 to this beautiful country in the USA. And I kind of brought with me many years of international experience of working with sea urchin production, both in industry and academia. So when I came over here, I was really thrilled to find out that there was this really exciting industry, this active fishery in Maine, in the northeast region of the US. So I immediately reached out to Steve Eddy in Maine to kind of learn more and figure out how we could kind of get together to learn about, whether we can like help the industry grow. And as Dana said, it's been a real privilege for me to kind of get together with this team who've been really fun and productive to work with. And my hope here is that everything we present today here is a step to help the industry grow. And if there's anyone who's interested in getting engaged or wants to learn more about this, we're going to point to some really interesting resources for you to access. Okay, so what are we talking about here? We are talking about this magnificent specimen here. This is the green sea urchin. Now, across the world, there are many species called the green sea urchin, and this specifically is called Strongylocentrotus jobachiensis. And you are very, you're so fortunate to have this wonderful specimen on your doorstep, especially for those who are based in Maine. This is a cold water species, which is found along the coastline, all the way up from the Northern Cape area up into the Arctic Canadian waters, at least in this section of the world, or the Atlantic. This animal, it sits on the seabed. It feeds on general animal and plant matter by grazing what's around on the sea floor. You can see it's covered in these really unusual kind of looking spines here. In what's inside this, which is called the green gold, is what people are looking for in terms of industry. So just to give you some sense of like scale of mass and size, this animal on the right hand side is probably about half a pound in weight. So they can be quite sizable, and somewhere between these two animals we probably have what we call market size in terms of what's harvested from the natural stock. So anything that's kind of 50 millimeters in size and up, or 2 or 3 inches, this is kind of like the sweet spot for what we're looking for in production. So these wonderful animals, they can be sold as you see them here, as live whole animals, but they also have a whole processing section going on. We have at least 2 or more processors based in Portland in Maine, and their sole job is to access what we call the green gold, which is this edible uni or roe. Sorry, it's called roe, but the Japanese call it uni, which is inside this animal. So if you cut it in half and look inside, we have this 5-armed star-shaped edible roe. And you can have it raw. So here we have this wonderful dish that I've had in the past in Rhode Island in the tunic oyster bar, which is a Maine sea urchin. And it's served on a lovely bed of seaweed. I highly recommend it if you're ever there. And also you can have it as an ingredient in pasta dishes as well. So it's quite a versatile product. But when it goes to processes, what they typically do is they'll remove each of these 5 segments of roe or uni from inside the animal and lay them out into these bamboo trays. So you've probably seen these in the markets online somewhere. And these are served for the sushi industry largely. We have these lovely trays that can be available and online, just to give you a sense of like how much these go for. A couple of examples I found online is from Providence. We have a Fearless Fish Market, which has this small uni tray for about 60 grams. This is $32. And then what we typically see from places like Brown Trading Co. based in Portland in Maine, we have this much larger 4-ounce tray, which has about 20 to 30 segments of these roe. So that's probably from about 4 or 6 animals. Just one tray can go for about $57.50 in price. So it's just kind of giving you some sense that this can be a high value species. And because of that, it's really no surprise that we have this active fishery. So here we can see sea urchins have been collected. They're usually kind of collected by divers who will go around with like a hand rake and collect them into these totes. But sadly, like all stocks that are exploited across the world, they eventually do decline. So here we are no stranger to that. So here we have data for Maine, because the fishery is primarily active in Maine. It used to be harvested from across Maine down to Massachusetts, but we had this whole boom and bust approach where the stocks have been overexploited over time, but they are managed at the moment. But initially, what was interesting about green urchins is that they were seen as a pest that invaded lobster cages. But when the sushi industry became very popular, exploitation of urchins became very popular. So where are we at now with the fishery? Well, today we're probably looking at somewhere around 400 metric tons a year of green urchins exploited, which are valued at about probably say $3 million. But this is nowhere near what it was like back in its heyday and its peak of its industry in the kind of the 80s and 90s, when we were like landing somewhere around 18,000 tons worth $30 million. So it highlights that there was significant economic opportunity there in the past. And this natural stock has been regulated, or is regulated, sorry, by the Department of Marine Resources, DMR. And this is informed through industry, through the Sea Urchin Zone Council. This is an advisory council made up of harvesters, processors, scientists, and we have an aquaculture representative in that group as well. You can find information about their website, about them on the DMR website. And they have all sorts of regulations which include gear types, catch size limits, and harvesting periods as well. So it's very seasonal and it's quite limited. So regulation is there. And what this really highlights, though, is that with this decline, we don't really see much room for the fishery to grow. But we have this incredible unmet demand for sea urchins. And because of the high value of these animals, there is certainly significant economic opportunity for the emerging sector of aquaculture. And that's, of course, what we're here to talk about today. So it's relatively new, and we have kind of the established kind of like pieces you need for the framework for the production chain to kind of get it going. So we have a hatchery seed supply. So Luz is going to talk to you all about that in a moment. This is the region's only seed production at the moment, which is housed in the University of Maine Center for Cooperative Aquaculture Research, which I'll call CCAR for short, CCAR. And the director of that facility is Steve Eddy, who Dana mentioned before. Unfortunately, Steve couldn't join us today, but we're in excellent hands with Luz Kogson today, who's the hatchery manager, research associate based in that location. So we're going to get some really interesting information about how seed are produced. But when we have these seed, they're ready to deploy at farms when they're roughly about 10 to 20 millimeters in size. They're easily handleable, like they can be easily handled at that size. At that size, they tend to survive fairly well when they go out to farms. And they're very versatile with the kind of growout technology that they can be kept within. And we're going to talk all about that later on today. But the one thing I do want to highlight, though, is that growth to market size for these animals, this is about 2 to 3 inches in size. It's slow. It takes at least 2 to 3 years, depending on the kind of methods you apply. And we'll talk about those later. So because of this, we do view this as a polyculture option, where we can grow these animals with pre-existing shellfish and seaweed like farms in those locations. But especially because these animals are very good at coping with climate change, like ocean acidification, where ocean chemistry is changing. So it makes them a really good product for thinking about diversification and resilience building in farms. We also have processors as a baseline as well for intercepting the market, but we're going to discuss kind of more potential options so that people can think about potential profit margins they may want to consider. Okay, so with any kind of emerging sector of aquaculture, there are always challenges which kind of slow the scale at which that's producing. When I first moved over from the UK to the US, I reached out to Steve to try and understand what that was. So Steve had mentioned that uptake had been really slow for aquaculture of green urchins. And after we were kind of discussing about this, what we kind of identified was that at that time, this is like 2017, 2018, when we were talking about this, he'd identified that hatchery methods were perhaps not as efficient as they could be, which made seed expensive, costing about 25 to 32 cents per seed, which is by no means competitive against oyster industry, which we know go for much, much less. But CCAR are dependent on external funding. So it means, if we can kind of commercialize or privatize supply of seed, these seed costs could come down a lot more. If we can invest further into CCAR hatchery methods, we may be able to drive those costs further down. And another area of slow uptake is probably because people weren't even aware that green urchins were an option for aquaculture, or perhaps didn't have the experience. So this is the kind of catalyst really that kind of got me together to reach out to Dana, to Luz, to Steve, to think about how can we collaboratively use our expertise together, and more importantly, work with this wonderful community of growers across the region who, have such great important expertise that can also help us address these challenges. So we've been doing a lot of really exciting work with a lot of really fantastic people across the whole area to work on addressing these challenges. And what we're going to talk to you today is kind of as a result of all those efforts collectively through multiple grants, multiple people. Okay, so I'm going to hand you over now to Lise Kogson, who's going to talk to you about hatchery production. Over to you, Lise.
Thank you very much, Coleen. Hi, hi again. Yes, I am the hatchery manager here at CCAR, and we're going to be talking about hatchery production and the production of seed and how we can get involved and how you can get the seed that we are producing right now. Okay, this is our facility, the CCAR, and we have a mission that is to grow the aquaculture sector in Maine through innovation, demonstration, facilitation, collaboration, and education. We target all these principles because we want to have people engaged. We want to educate people about this, and then also let them know that we can help with infrastructure and expertise to collaborate in all the projects or trials that they just wanted to do in aquaculture. We have been working with several species. Among them, there are Atlantic salmon, lumpfish, sea urchins, California yellowtail, marine ornamentals, American eels. And in the past, also, we worked with American Atlantic halibut and sea vegetables and marine polychaetes. And we serve as a hatchery production center, and also we serve as a business incubation. Any new venture in aquaculture that is interested in Maine or beyond Maine, they can just come and ask for help, and we're just more than happy to do it. Now jump into the hatchery part of it. Here we have identified 4 main steps that we're going just to be able to tackle in order to produce the seed. And I will mention that first, and I'm going just to go little by little. I'm going to explain what kind of work in detail we do in each step. Here we have the broodstock management, spawning and incubation, and then we have the larval developmental stages. We have the phytoplankton production and settlement tanks systems. And then if you go please back to the first one, where you have the broodstock. I'm going just to talk a little bit about this. How we get the broodstock in here. We are now having the broodstock here in-house all year round. We just get in late December and ask a diver. In this case, Dave Quimby has been our collaborator for so many years. So I'm grateful for him for all the input and the quality of the urchin that has been bringing us to be able to do this work. And then we will have them in a greenhouse. Temperature is going to be ambient temperature, and also the photoperiod is going to be ambient, and they're going to be acclimate themselves to get ready to spawn. But also the thing that we do to maximize that is just to put a lot of kelp in there. We fed them as much as possible just to make sure that when we're going to start spawning, they're going to be ready. When they're ready, we get 15 or 20 sea urchins from that tank. We have to induce the spawning, and then for that matter, we have to use potassium chloride. That will make that contraction in the gonads, and they're going to be releasing eggs or the milk. At that point, we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be a male or female, and we are hoping from those 15 or 20 sea urchins, there will be at least half of them is going to be females. That's the thing. When we get too many males, it's like, okay, yes, you are so helpful, but we need eggs in order just to have a bigger population. And then we collect the eggs, and then we collect at the same time we are collecting the milk. We put the eggs in a beaker, a 5-liter container, and then we have to use the milk, collect them, put in a beaker with 1 liter, because we have to make sure that it's going to be activated in order just to produce the fertilization. The fertilization is going to be like the picture that you see next to the beaker with the eggs. And at that point, we do rinse them, because there is a phenomenon that happens in sea urchins when you are doing the fertilization. It could be polyespermation. That means more than sperm can go into the egg and destroy the possibility of life. And then we have to make sure there's going to be clean enough. We rinse them, clean them out, count, and put them in the incubator for 48 hours. And at that time, there is going to be happening the cell division. Cell division is going to be until they got to the gastrule stage. And it is amazing. It is just the best thing ever that you can see, because for me, it's like a miracle of life, how seeing them how to produce from 2 eggs, let's say division for 2 eggs, to cells division for 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on until they get to gastrule stage. When 48 hours had come, they already hatch. They hatch in about 24 hours, but they have to have a little bit more time just to get to the gastrule stage. And we put it into the conical tanks. The conical tanks is the starter or our development stages. That's going to be the next one, because that will be when you get to the pleuris stage, the stomach is going to be developed, and then these guys are going to be ready to get fed and then start growing and doing all the changes that they need until they become competent larvae in order just to get to go through metamorphosis and then become a juvenile. This stage is going to take about 21 to 25 days, depending on temperature. The temperature that is going to be about 11 degrees Celsius, and that's going to be the best time for us, because it's not too long and it's not too short, and that to be able to favor the survival of the juveniles and getting through the competency stage and also become a juvenile. Then they have several stages, and they're going to be 4 arms. They're going to be 6 arms. Then they're going to have the 8 arms, and one little organella is going to start growing. That is going to be they're going to determine how viable these larvae were going to be to become a sea urchin, and it's the rudiment. We pay much attention to that because they grow along the stomach, and when they reach the length of the stomach, then the sea urchin is going to be actually ready to get to do the metamorphosis and then to become a sea juvenile. You see in the picture in the top on the right, you will see that is a competent larvae right now. You can see that you have 2 feet, and at that point, it is ready just to settle and do the metamorphosis. At that point, you have to stock them in the sediment tanks. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get them out from the conicals, because that is going to be, you let them for another 4 hours, 24 hours, they're going to be already at the stage that become a sea urchin. Metamorphosis has been done, and then not much that you can do trying to retrieve those little guys from the conical tank, and they should be at that time to the sediment tanks. And then the next one, please, is going to be showing you the summary and all the things that I just said. That is going to be a poster that we're able to produce here at home. We can see these same stages with different species, but one of the targets that we have is trying to have one that will belong to Maine and the great grain sea urchin. And then we were able to do that with a lot of help with funding from different places like Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission and NOAA, and then from NRAC, the Northeastern Regional Aquaculture Center with NIFA, and then all the volunteers that we were able to have the time to take all the pictures, select the pictures, and then go through this. And you can see down, you have a YouTube video that you can watch all the process of that I just relayed to this, and it's quite cool. You will see, and also a bonus on that video, then you're going to see the fertilization process. You're going to have a video what happened in 3 minutes when they get fertilized and ready just to potentially be little sea urchins. And then the next step is actually one of the crucial ones, that is going to the phytoplankton production. Without this, we're not going to be able to get to a sea urchin competency and then go into the sediment tanks. Now, I'm so happy to say that we have a lab that is dedicated to this, and we have to start from scratch every single time. And then we just got started cultures, 15 males from different labs, could be Bigelow, could be the Milford lab in Connecticut, or the Down East Institute. And then we started from that 15 males, and we end up having 70 liters or even 500 liters or 1,000 liters when you use industrial planter machine. But normally we are just in the process that we use different size of flasks, 500 to 50 to 500 mils, up to 2.8 liters in flask, and then go to carboys, it's 10 liters, and then go to K-walls, 7 liters. But you stagger the production in order that you're going to be able to have the best and fresher food available for the sea urchin during those 21 days. And then you're going to have a really quality larvae that is going to withstand the process and the stress of metamorphosis, and they're going to be able to become juvenile. And then we use 3 different species. We combine the 3 species at once, even from the starter, from the day 1 we start feeding. You use Dunaliella, you use Rhodomonas, and we use Chitoceros. And then that is 2 flagellates and 1 diatom, and that combination of algae gives enough nutrition to support and nourish them really good and to enhance survival. And the last but not least, it is the sediment systems. I'm talking about the last one here, but actually this is the first one when we started, because we have to start this process between 3 or 4 months at least beforehand. We're going to spawn the first time, because in the first one from the left to the right, you see the bio barrels. This is plastic infrastructure that you use for biofiltration, but now we use those for allow them to put in the system, conditioning them that are going to be getting the biofilm attached to it. And we go through that, and that's the food that the new sea urchin, the juvenile, is going to have access to, because they don't have a mouth that is going to be functional yet. And then we have to provide that food in order just to, with the 2 feet, just in order just to scout it and just look for food and just be nourished. And then you can see now that 10 days later, you will see how successful you were in the process, because now you can see that 10 days later, you have to see little pinheads in the water showing that you have sea urchins coming up. It's a microscopic thing that you're going to see the details. And then at that point, I put some kelp, and the kelp is going to help me just to provide more nourish. Here we have the different systems that we use: bio barrels, polycarbonate plates, wavy plates, and those are the vitros that we were using the past season, and then that was a really successful opportunity and try. And then here we are wondering, and I think it's going to be more going to the biofilter bio barrels in near future, and modify a little bit these cages, or just in order just enable the attachment to these plates. Because when I use the vitros this time, we modify the drain and everything, but also if you see in the last one on the right, bottom right, I did the orientation in a different way. Normally we were putting the horizontal, and then now we put it just vertical. Sorry, you can just vertical, and now I use horizontal. And you see in the last photo how well they attach, and it was absolutely amazing the amount of sea urchins that I got from those plays in that organization. And then the vitros is a tank that is going to be in with a incline and slope, and then you will see the green little white spots in there. They are just little sea urchins. And then I use as another kind of substrate, I use mussel shells and use clamshells, but the biofilm formation on those that were not that as we were expecting, because they were so smooth and they were not able to attach this firmly. And then the better result was in the polycarbonate plates, depending on the orientation of the plates or the bio barrels. And then now, once we get all these guys, they are growing, and now they are ready just to get to the new adventure and new farmers and to start the production and be so amazed. Here you have my email, just in case that you want to contact me or contact CCAR for seed, and also to contact the team about seed distribution. We have in the past using aquaponics baskets to carry them out, and coolers and rockweed. Here I have an example with water. It's better not to, it's not necessary to use water just when you use the cooler. But if you see the space is limited, that means if you have to send away or transfer more than 100 to 100 sea urchins, you will need tons, many of the coolers and infrastructure or just structure just to deal with this. That is an example how we did one stocking in Jordan Pond, and with the baskets that were not that cool either because they float. And when you try to put this down in the bottom, you can imagine they are all over the place. And then it was a struggle. And then, but thankfully, with our collaborators, David and Kip Quimby, they came up with the idea, why would I use muslin scallop bags? Let's give it a try. And then actually, that's the thing we did. Here I have one. It is about the size of this one. It is 16 by 25. It is round corners. You wet this, just make sure that it's going to be humid. You put this in, you put the sea urchins, you put it inside them. And guess what? They are phenomenal good. When you put this back inside out, they just fall without any hesitation. They don't attach to the cloth. They don't harm themselves. They don't break the spines, and they don't float. That means that you can just carry them down to the bottom of the cages, put it inside, do the stocking, and also when you are preparing just to carry them out, you can just put it in your tanks, in the baskets, but you can just put it then after that in the cooler and just go out with all of them in with less equipment, and they are absolutely in excellent shape. We have been sampled these twice, and they are just, the survival was excellent. And that means that is, in my case, and it will be my recommendation, just to go for make the transportation and the distribution of the seeds in these kind of bags, and will be less time consuming, a lot of efficiency, and then it's going to be pretty good. And the last thing that I'm going just to tell you is just please take note about my email if you want to have some seed, to want to request some seed, and the process will be so really simple. Send us an email with some information about you, like the number of sea urchins that you wanted, the purpose of the why you want the sea urchins, the culture that I'm going to be using, location of the farm, of your farm, general environmental conditions, depth, water temperature, especially in the summer. What will be the maximum temperature that are going to be in the summer? Because these little guys, as Coleen mentioned at the beginning, they are cold water species. They don't do well when the temperatures go beyond 17 Celsius, degrees Celsius. And also one important thing is that if you are thinking about sea urchins, please, you will have to have a permit from DMR on our LPA, and then we're going to get that information. We're going to evaluate your all the information that you sent us. We're going just all the team. We're going to get together just to do this, and after that, we're going to contact you with a response. But please, if you don't have all these requirements, just please anyway contact us and make sure that we're going to help you with all the process, just to make sure they're going just to be working and experimenting with this amazing species. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Luz. Really appreciate that. So there's a quick 101 on the great hatchery work that CCAR are doing. So, we're kind of assuming that a lot of you who have joined us today are potentially interested in growing sea urchins or, in some capacity. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is kind of general advice based on what we've learned. So I hope that, all of you can learn something from this, regardless of like the angle that you're coming at from as an audience today. So thinking, putting yourselves as a grower in this journey that we're going through now, you have these great seed that have been produced from this hatchery, but what do you do with them then? Well, as Luz has highlighted, they're a very versatile species. Green sea urchins are, as a polyculture option. They can grow in a range of gear, and what we recommend for gear is potentially these on-bottom cages that you see here, or suspended gear types like pearl nets or lantern nets. We know that urchins can grow well in these systems, but also what this means is that this allows the animals to be kept in sort of deeper, cooler waters, because as Luz highlighted, green sea urchins are a clod water species, and ideally they need to be kept in water conditions that are less than 18 degrees Celsius. So that is definitely an important consideration for anyone who may be considering taking up urchin aquaculture. So, but the benefit is it can potentially be held in pre-existing gear, which is something we're very mindful of. We don't want people to have to spend lots of capital when introducing new species to an area. Something I think that's very noteworthy is also that urchins could potentially help with biofouling problems, because I know biofouling is something that is pervasive across the industry, where we have this excess biological material growing on the outside of nets, which has to be replaced because otherwise gear becomes too heavy to pull out. It also can restrict water coming through the cage or nets, which are important for animals' health. So here we have an example of 2 lantern nets from northern China. We've been holding a species which are relevant to that area for scallops and urchins. And when they had their lantern nets for scallops only, you can see there's quite a lot of biofouling on the external surface of the net here. But when they did integrate urchins in with the scallops inside the lantern nets, the urchins were able to intercept some of the external biofouling as a food source, because they can extend their kind of jaw through these like larger mesh sizes. Sure, it's not perfectly clean, but this could have important consequences for maybe some of the efforts that growers may have for regularly replacing or cleaning gear. So we were interested to see whether that might translate well or not to green sea urchins here in the Northeast, especially in Maine. So we're kind of like been testing this out with a range of fantastic people. I want to just do a shout out to Annie Langston-Knoll and her team. We've been working with them a little bit with looking at integrating urchins with oysters. But here, some of our kind of more extensive efforts have been with Stuart Hunt at Casco Bay Mooring, who grows Atlantic sea scallops, which is another emerging sector of aquaculture in the region. And previous literature that's looked at various species of urchins and shellfish together have shown that biofouling can be reduced by somewhere between 30 to 100%, which has a positive effect on labor-intensive efforts. So that's why this is kind of the real motivator here, is to see if we can try and intercept and utilize urchins as a tool for that. So unfortunately, I don't have much data to share with you at the moment, but what I can tell you is that through tremendous funding through the Northeast Air program, which is a partnership grant between researchers and growers, is where we've been culturing green sea urchins sourced from this hatchery with Atlantic sea scallops. And we've been trying a whole bunch of different stocking densities, size classes for both species to try and see if we can find the ultimate sweet spot that we can then advise for industry. From what we've tried so far, we have shown that the 2 species can integrate well together. We've got good survival, so that's very motivating. We perhaps didn't see some of the dramatically beneficial effects of reducing biofouling, but we're not dissuaded, because talking with Stuart and with my graduate research assistant, Brendan Elder, we've identified some ideas about next steps that we need to try and get those more dramatically beneficial results. So those will be ongoing this spring, summer. So more news to follow, hopefully. But just wanted to highlight that, those are activities that are going on. So going back to kind of thinking about growing sea urchins in potential farm locations across the Gulf of Maine or northeastern, like northeast areas, environment is obviously a key factor here. And we keep repeating this, but this is like one of the most important things is temperature. So we know that the optimum temperatures for green sea urchins is between 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, but ideally they do need to be kept under 18 degrees Celsius. So that's something that's really important. We have seen that they have some very short-term tolerance to wider ranges of temperatures, like down to -1 degree Celsius or up to 20 degrees Celsius. But again, it's very short-term. Ideally, it's got to be less than 18 degrees Celsius. The animals need moderate to high seawater flow because we have to be able to flush, help flush away carbon dioxide that builds up, for example, and get them plenty of oxygen. And they need some pretty salty conditions as well. This is a marine species. Ideally, it needs somewhere between 32 to 36 parts per thousand salinity. We have seen them survive at 30 parts per thousand and maybe less, but it does start to have a negative impact on the quality of the roe. It can get a little bit watery in its like consistency. So it has to be fairly marine. And also something that we have learned through our research is that you really also need to consider, if you're thinking about your farm's potential suitability to host green sea urchins, also consider what kind of freshening you might get during like really major storms where you have major freshwater input from land sources, because that in combination with maybe high temperatures in the summer, we've found can kill sea urchins. So do think about storm influence as well, because that will have to be factored in. But from the really rich conversations that we've had from this the great grower community across the region, what we've kind of been learning is that many don't really measure temperature or salinity at their farms. And getting access to this information would be really, really helpful to us to understand suitability of farms to host green sea urchins, but also it will help us kind of improve our understanding about their tolerance ranges as well. So if you're interested in maybe starting to do this, if you're not doing it already, I would be really happy to kind of give any guidance if needed. So feel free to reach out to me. My contact details will be at the end of this presentation. And also, I've been helping a few farmers get access to farmer grants to support costs needed to monitor those things. So that's another area that I might be able to help with. And I'm sure maybe some of the broader team will be willing to do so as well. If you're thinking about monitoring these things, some things I would consider is the submersible data loggers. They're waterproof, so you can put them at your farm and you can program them to collect temperature data at whatever frequency. So it could be every hour or every 15 minutes or every minute, depending what kind of frequency you want. The logger itself is $85 and the reader is $175. And this is for these like hobo data loggers. They're really great and they're very easy to use. Also measuring salinity, you can use these handheld refractometers. You put your sample of water on the prism here, you look through an eyepiece and you'll see a scale, and then a line will appear to indicate where on the scale your salinity level is at. And you can calibrate these with fresh water. They're very affordable, so $25 to $50 a go on Amazon. And if you're not sure how to use these, I do have a YouTube video that because I train so many students and growers on using these kind of pieces of equipment. So I created a video so that people could self-learn on this. So feel free to access that, or I can share that information down the line. So another component of growout considerations is food supply. So sea urchins are not like oysters where they depend on on feeding plankton supply. They do need access to food. Now, the fortunate thing is that they can feed on like detritus, biofilms, biofouling without any potential additional feed. We see this as kind of like a baseline minimal food supply that's naturally occurring in a growout site. But the roe or the uni is driven primarily by diet. So the less you put in, the less you're going to get out. So if you decide to maybe grow these in cages and have a hands-off approach and not feed them and let them feed on this natural material, the roe content is not going to be great, meaning you're going to get minimal price, and also it's going to take even longer to reach the market. So you're looking at probably more than 3 years. So what we do recommend is that you do provide additional food supplies to help enhance that roe and help reduce the time to the market. And how much effort you want to put in is entirely, at your prerogative as a grower about how much effort and input you want to put into that. So There are formulated feeds like fish pellets, for example, the high protein, and they've been shown to work best to kind of fatten up those edible tissues, those uni. But because this is an additional input into a farm environment, it will need regulatory approval, and I think that will come from the EPA. I'll cover that later. But we know that sea urchins really love eating seaweed. It's part of their natural diet. And seaweeds have this really great pigment inside them called beta-carotene, and that is used to translate really well into good market colors for the roe. So, excuse me. So things like sugar kelp, Alaria dulse, sea lettuce, they all work really well. Preferred to be fresh, but if you want to dry it for whatever reason, then that can be used. But they're not very keen on eating rockweed, fucus, or some sort of general invasives, which means we're going to get slow growth. So getting the seaweed is probably is part of your kind of right approach for fattening up those uni and getting the urchins to grow. So things to consider is if you're going to be giving them seaweed, you have to think about where that's coming from. So you might want to consider growing it on site, or maybe buying it from another grower, or wild harvesting it. And providing feed, increases the labor intensity associated with producing green urchins. So you're going to have to stuff the cages full of seaweed at least once or twice a month. And the uni is entirely driven by the food quality. So you want these kind of 12 to 25% gonad index. And this is calculated by the gonad mass, so that's the edible tissue here, divided by the whole live animal wet mass expressed as a percentage. And we ideally want these bright yellow orange colors, and that comes from that great pigment from algae. And the taste is important. They need to be clean, briny, sweet, umami. We don't want a fishy kind of flavor, and that can come from formulated feeds because they have fish-derived products in them. So that's just something to be mindful of. And we want them to be nice and firm. This is a seasonal product, so it peaks in the winter months when these uni are nice and firm. And you're going to have a really tough time trying to market them during the reproductive period, which is April to June, because as soon as you dissect these or cut them open, they're going to start shedding those eggs and sperm that Luz showed earlier for the hatchery, which instantly reduces the volume and discolors the gonads. So it's not a good time to market them. And what we recommend for anyone new to this is to try and sell urchins on the shell initially as a live animal, because trying to get these kind of like uni tray quality roe is a trial and error process, and that can take some time to achieve. So that's something that we recommend. So thinking about scalability, urchins do attach to surfaces, as you can see here. So that's going to be an important factor for farming at scale. They'll need about an inch space around each urchin to give room for the spine interactions that can have a negative impact on growth. Anything that's hobby scale, less than 5 animals in a batch, that's easy to grow but not profitable. If you want to think about 5,000 to 50,000 urchins to maybe make a profit, then we need to think about how much scale that's going to need in terms of space. So based on methods that we know are well established in China, but we're still trying to establish them here in Maine. If you have a harvest density of around 50 to 80 2-inch size animals per 5 to 9 square feet, that means 25,000 market size animals are going to require 2,800 square feet surface area. And when you translate that to a cage size of roughly 2 by 3 by 4 feet, that gives you about 40 square foot of size, and that's equivalent to 70 cages. But remember, if they're smaller animals, you can scale this down. So you have to kind of thin them out as they grow out. And permitting, we do need a permit to be able to grow urchins. So you need to have a permitted lease site or land-based aquaculture license from the Maine Department of Marine Resources. And it has to include or specify green urchins. And if you intend to feed them with algae sourced from outside the site's boundaries or with formulated feed, then you will have to look at the Maine Department of Environmental Protection for a potential discharge permit. So do look at those websites if you're looking for more information, because they'll have regulations and permit information that you need to access. So we have, there's a whole range of methods, and a lot of people are trying different things here in Maine. What Steve has done is kind of collated this really great table, which I'm going to kind of quickly walk through here. But this table's talking about methods of production for Maine, not really necessarily for national urchin production. And this table is available in some of these open source resources that Dana's going to list later on. And so you can take your time to kind of read through this. I'm just going to have to quickly overview this because we're running out of time quickly. So basically, there's a whole range of methods that we can consider here. So you could do sea ranching, where you basically get these animals and then you let them free range on a hard bottom leased environment, leased area. So 1 acre is probably the minimum amount that you want, but you probably want about 3 or 5 acres to support room for roaming, because these animals are going to be moving around in that environment and feeding on whatever's there. The problem with sea ranching, it's pretty unpredictable because it depends on what the food is there, what the environment is like. The benefit is input is minimal. You can access it with a boat or diving, so you do need some infrastructure like that. And as a result, it's probably going to have a slow, because we're not supplementing the food, it's going to take a long time to get to the market. So you're probably looking at several years for it to get there. And because of the low food input, you're going to have low value back and get like a basic value price for that, which we'll talk about in a moment. Land-based technology is a great way is the opposite extreme of this, where you can invest heavily into infrastructure, buildings, equipment, and labor intensity to control and manipulate an environment. And that will substantially reduce your time to the market and significantly improve the quality of the product and value of the product at the end. But it's a very expensive venture to do this. And it's not something we typically recommend to growers. You can use the land-based technology to maybe supplement wild harvested urchins, but you're competing against a fishery already, so that's not something I think would be very viable for Maine. But the most kind of viable options really are pre-existing farms, where you may have an area where you can put on bottom cages and have low input. You can use hanging gear or a combination of the two at pre-existing areas where you're already growing shellfish, such as oysters, mussels, scallops, or even macroalgae like kelp, for example. So, you can use that pre-existing space. You just have to make sure that you have licenses that specify multiple species. But these all require kind of some sort of LPA or lease requirements. So remember that kind of legal side, that's absolutely critical here. One of the benefits of integrating them with a seaweed farm is that you have access to seaweed on site. So you could use any scraps that you're not intending to sell or utilize, or perhaps they go past their kind of sort of prime market season. That could be beneficial to supplement the food supply of the urchins. So there is some benefit there. So I'm sorry, that's a really quick overview. I'm just conscious of time, and I want to make sure there's time for questions. But last few slides, Steve's asked me to present these on behalf of him to talk about sea urchin economics. So things he wants you to be aware of is that, we have at least 2, maybe more processes based in Portland, Maine. They need several £100, 2 to 3 times, 700 pounds of green sea urchins 2 or 3 times a week. So they need a steady supply. And they're very unlikely to pay more than the fishery dock price for farmed urchins. They don't see farmed urchins as a very desirable option. But if you were to sell directly to chefs may prefer that, because farming can be sold as a great sustainability narrative there. So there could be some options there. So what this means is that growers must compete with the fishery for the market. Dock prices for urchins have been stable, even though landings have declined. So we're not really sure why that is. But you're looking at a landing price of about $3 per pound, which is about 3 to 6 legal-sized animals per pound. So it ends up being about 60 cents to 75 cents per animal, which doesn't sound like a lot. But we do see substantial opportunity and profit opportunities with direct marketing. So looking online, we have a whole range of examples here where you can buy bulk live animals from the West Coast, for example. You can have 5 pieces at 120 bucks a go. Here you can have live green urchins for £20 at 250 bucks. So there's definitely some opportunities there for direct marketing. But again, you're going to be competing against the fishery, so that can be quite challenging. But they offer the well-established kind of facilities to help facilitate that. But urchins are currently a seasonal product with winter availability only. So growers could potentially market year-round if they had access to a land-based conditioning facility, which is something that could be considered for industry. And growers can potentially guarantee high yield and quality in every animal. So that could be a beneficial aspect here. But really what we have here is a giant question mark in this box, because we have a whole bunch of things we don't know yet, and we need to work with industry and get investment from funding agencies to better understand this so that we can help this industry grow. We need to know, like, who buys live urchins and where is the market have most potential? Is it with high-end chefs? You know, we've got New York, Boston on our doorstep. You know, this is great access here. Are there other markets we should be considering, other individual consumers? And things we're really not too sure about yet either is you know, how do we create that access to that market for growers? And also what, you know, how many urchins does the urchin need in an inventory to make a profit from this? So it sounds like a lot of negatives on this, but, you know, I want to put this in like context. If you have 50,000 urchins as a standing crop and a 2-year harvest cycle, that's $25,000 per year. Sorry, 25,000 urchins per year. If you consider seed costs, yes, they're expensive, 25 cents per animal. So that's just over $6,000, but we hope to reduce that with further investment to optimize production. But annual labor costs, feed costs, boat operation costs, we don't know. It depends. But if we go by dot price, 25,000 urchins can equivalent to $15,000 to $18,000. But if we can access this direct market, there is substantial opportunity to make $75,000 or more. And this is what's motivating us here, along with interest that's growing. So part of our outreach with Dana, we've been increasing resources and awareness that urchins are an option. We have a urchin interest list to inform industry and get seed requests. More than 80 growers have expressed interest, and we've shown some positive changes in this industry. So we've got more than 266% increase in uptake, which is exciting. 36% of those farms have increased their scale, and there's potential for a private seed supply very soon, which could make it much more affordable. So there's lots of good changes and practices going on, lots of interest. And I'm so sorry this is running over, but Dana, maybe you just want to quickly run over the resources, and then we might have time for a question.
Sure thing. Thanks. Yeah, just to wrap up here a little bit, there are some ways that you can learn more. Here is a document that we put together. Is basically kind of an extended fact sheet sort of thing, and you can find that available through Sea Grant. I think it's also available on the CCAR website. Next slide, please. And then there's a few other elements in here. We do have some web pages up on the CCAR website. There's that informational booklet, and then the aquaculture, the urchin aquaculture email list. You can see there as well. Let's see, there was one other thing. I'm not sure if it made it on here, but we do have, maybe it's in the next slide. We did a webinar about 1.5 years ago. And that one is available to watch. It's an hour long or so, kind of like this. And if you're interested in that, you can contact any one of us and we can get you that URL. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all so much. I think we have time for the one question, which is in the chat right now. So this person is wondering if there are efforts to create selectively bred broodstock lines for traits like fast growth, climate change, resiliency, and et cetera. So.
Yeah, great question there. I'm sure the others can input on this, but very briefly, there are no consorted efforts for selective breeding lines that we're aware of, like they do for the oyster industry. But I have run a 3-generational study back in the UK where I bred 3 generations of urchins under ocean acidification conditions. And interestingly, what we found out is that within a generation, the animals became even more marketable because they were prioritizing reproduction, which is the edible uni. So I was kind of excited about that. So there could be even more potential there, but they're very good at adjusting their physiology. So urchins are pretty good already at being quite resilient, but I really appreciate that question because it is an important one to ask. I don't know if Luz or Dana has any input on that question.
Oh, Luz, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, the thing is, we were thinking also about that, but it will be a little challenging. It will be taking a lot of money just to run the project and modify this. And then we have been based on the fishery, and then that will be the case from going on right now. But it will be a substantial amount of money just required for this purpose.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to 1 o'clock. So I know people have things going on, but thank you all so much for this presentation. I learned a lot, didn't know much about sea urchins, so that's really cool. And this is a recorded webinar, so we'll send out the recording to everyone who attended and registered sometime next week. So thank you, and have a great rest of your Friday afternoon.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
everyone.